very excited to have you all with us. Thank you for joining for another town hall webinar. We couldn't be more excited about this one. I'm thrilled to be introducing you all to my colleague and friend, Dr. Pete Cummings, a neuropathologist with an extraordinary array of talent and background with a multifaceted life, a triple board certified physician, which is a term that you may have become acquainted through my website and all of that. It's exciting to know that there's many doctors out there that have pursued nonlinear educational pathways, and Peter's one of the exciting ones, and I'm just thrilled that you all have made it possible to bring Peter here with us. You guys have started to fund the Global Education Forum here, and through that GoFundMe site, it's allowed me to hire the talent of Pete, and I look forward to hiring the talent of many others in the future so that we have a way in which to bring an educational platform to the world to be an antidote, perhaps, to the extraordinary array of misinformation that is being fed through a media organization now rather than through scientific journals. And I'm very eager for the public to increasingly have access to real science and kind of the cutting edge environment in which we now sit, and we're at this privileged time in science where the acceleration of knowledge is mind-boggling. The amount of data produced every year has now exceeded what we would expect in 100 years at any other time in history. And so I'm really pleased to envision with you all and create with this community the opportunity for a science for the people, by the people kind of environment here, where we can really start to met out what are the fundamentals of human health. How do we build a healthy nation and a healthy population globally that would become its own antidote to the chronic disease epidemics, not to mention the pandemics that we currently see. So I'm thrilled and in deep gratitude to each of you who've contributed to the GoFundMe site to make this growing pool of talent possible. A huge shout out and thank you to Jesse Gardner, who is behind the scenes making all of this happen, and to Bjorn, who's always working hard to create the visual content around the storytelling and narrative that goes out there around all of the material that we create together. And so thank you for those behind the scenes. Most of all, though, thank you for all of you joining from all over the world. Thank you for your attention to the issues at hand. Thank you for your time, which is precious. It's the most precious thing we have as humans. We have such a finite lifespan. We have such finite attention in these minds and brains of ours that we'll be talking about today. And you're contributing that time and energy towards focus, and deep appreciation for that. So thank you. And without too much further ado, I want to debut the topic of the day, which is sleep. This comes in my personal life at a very poignant moment because my wife and I decided to have an adventure over the weekend where we're going to do our first Pacific Ocean sailing trip, and we were going to go spend the night on our boat for the first time up in the ocean. It was going to be this sort of romantic time that we both envisioned. And of course, Mother Nature had her way with us with a bit of humor. And within like half an hour of us arriving at our destination after 8 hours of sailing, it's the first time I've sailed in the open ocean, which was enough of an experience to talk about. We find out minutes before anchoring that we were going to be in the midst of the first really large winter swell on the northern side of Hawaii, with waves that might be 15 to 20 feet high on their face. And so it was a sudden question of like, are we safe here? Where do we need to go? What do we need to do? Made some phone calls. My wife has always got the right connections to get us the real answers. And the answer was, it could get nasty. The first time you feel swell that feels completely out of the range of normal, get the heck out of there and get out into the open ocean again. And so about 2:30 in the morning, with zero sleep, because we were being tossed and turned throughout the early evening, it became obvious that things were getting worse, not better. And so started sailing out into the dark at 2:30 in the morning, and finished that sail some 24 hours after starting it. We hadn't slept in 30 hours. And so I have lived sleep deprivation pretty severely over the last weekend. And it was a great reminder of some of the challenges physiologically that happen during sleep deprivation, but also some of the beauty. And so there's a tendency for us to beat ourselves up over the fact that we don't sleep enough, we don't eat right enough, we don't exercise enough. I want to welcome us into an opportunity to consider the possibility that we are on a journey that's on purpose. And when you miss sleep, when you miss exercise, when you miss nutrition, you're on a journey to understand something deeper. And it's not there's no fault in any of these shortcomings that you might find biologically or in your lifestyle today. What happened to us that night was we were sailing in the Pacific from 2:30 to 5:30 in the morning in the dark in 30-foot swells in the middle of the ocean. And I can't see those swells coming. And the boat is just undulating in a ridiculous fashion. And I'm just trying to stay on course. And I feel like that was such an exemplary experience of what it feels like to be a parent, or what it feels like to be suddenly an adult that has to make decisions and you don't know what's coming, and life is swelling at you in the dark and you're trying to just stay on course. And so in that way, I felt like that's a microcosm of the human experiences. We just can't figure out what's about to hit us. And then every few minutes, I would get the opportunity to take a breath and look up, and the expanse of stars above me in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's overwhelming to express the beauty that stood in the heavens above. And it turned out, totally unbeknownst to us, that we were at the beginning of one of the largest meteor showers of the Orion meteor shower that happens every 60 years or so had started. And we got to see the most extraordinary fireworks show of meteors and falling stars, which really looked different. The falling stars, my wife did a good job of describing it as just a shower on the periphery of the sky, and then of course the streaking meteors overhead. And just a really poignant moment to realize that in the midst of sleep deprivation, in the midst of desperate measures to try to just stay alive and do the right thing to reduce risk in the next couple seconds, in that damage control moment, the universe is showing us the most extraordinary beauty it would have and hold for us. And so if you are sleep deprived, if you are nutrient deprived, if you are socially deprived after months of quarantine and social distancing and all of this, I want you to know that nature is going to use that moment to show you something beautiful. And so I think that some of that will come today. But as you start to ponder what it feels like to be in sleep deprivation and the ways in which your mind actually does work differently in a sleep deprived state, you're capable of seeing things differently when you're in major depression, or when you're in a 5-day fast and you're shifting hormonally there. So rather than damning yourself for some lack of sleep, open yourself up to the possibility that you see the world differently, and you come to be able to value something like sleep differently in its absence than in its abundance. And so I hope that you all take the opportunity to really start to dig into your own life to say, yes, I'm making some fundamental mistakes about my lifestyle, about my relationship to these fundamental things like sleep, like food, like exercise. But instead of seeing that as some sort of damaged or desperate state, what if it's the possibility that I'm going to start to see the world differently, for coming to understand why I made the life decisions that are putting me in the sleep deprived state or the rest. And I'm encouraging you guys to think beyond the science today, beyond the call to get better sleep, to start thinking more broadly about your life. What created the lifestyle that has kept you in a sleep deprived state, and what parts of your lifestyle could be rearranged such that sleep becomes the result rather than the focus of your efforts. Too often in clinic, I've seen people struggling with long-term severe insomnia or other sleep disorders make sleep the focus. And when they do that, it can become a vicious cycle and a destructive cycle of, I can't get it, it feels elusive, and it starts to escape, when in fact, what needs to become the focus is not the sleep, but the reasons why the sleep isn't happening. And so I would encourage all of you to think broadly about your lifestyle today, and as you start to imagine a future that would include deep sleep, imagine what the rest of the day would feel like. What would it feel like to have a lifestyle that was preparing for sleep in the morning hours and in the afternoon, and the patterns that are being set up there to create that successful sleep. So we're going to think broadly as we can, and we will surely miss the mark on the breadth of your life, and not knowing each of you to the depth that you know yourself. And we ask that you do that deep exploration to find out your own truths, and hopefully share those back too. We would love to hear from you, social media or on the contact us on the webpage or whatnot, zachbushmd.com. And then Zach Bush on the Zach Bush MD on the Instagram or Facebook, and you'll chase us down there with stories of what you learned as you started to apply lifestyle shift to obtain a sleep that perhaps you haven't had before. So without further ado, Dr. Pete Cummings is joining us. Pete, I'm going to let you do an introduction to yourself, just because I think it's better than a canned experience for the audience to hear my perspective. I would love for, it's always fun to hear somebody tell their own journey. And I hope that you would highlight in that your nonprofit for the kids and the exercise programs you're putting together there, because I think it's just really thrilling and exciting to hear what you're doing on that front. So without further ado, audience, enjoy Pete Cummings, triple board certified neuropathologist and a great colleague and friend.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And like you, I cringe when I hear the word triple board certified. It's kind of like, ugh, I appreciate it, Zach, and I'm very thankful for your friendship and working with you. Zach and I have known each other off and on for quite a long time. We were residents together for a period at UVA, and talk about sleep deprivation. Zach and I were residents about the time where they were trying to institute an 80-hour work week, trying to limit us to 80 hours. And we lived for decades sleep deprived. So it's a fascinating topic for sure. I want to thank everybody for the new Instagram follows and for funding this opportunity to work with Zach and to communicate with you all various topics that are important and things that both Zach and I are passionate about in our own lives and want to share with you. I'm a neuropathologist and I'm a forensic pathologist. So I do both areas of medicine. And for a long period of time, I was very frustrated because I felt like I wasn't doing anything to help. And the analogy I like to use is that I felt like I was standing outside of a house fire, watching the house burn and not being able to do anything. And I don't know how many times I was putting morbid obesity on a death certificate, or complications of diabetes, heart attacks in people who were in their late 30s, early 40s, very young people. And so it sort of shifted my ideology to try to find a way to get involved and help people and be a better part of my community in a global sense, to help people live better. Because that's really, as corny as it sounds, why we get into medicine. And we spend a lot of time in medicine focused on disease and illness and very little time focused on wellness. I never took a wellness class, but I took a lot of pathology classes. I took a lot of disease classes. I don't think I took a nutrition class, which is unbelievable. Anything I know about nutrition was, learned through my own life experiences with exercise and fitness. That journey has led me to, I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Veritas Sports Injury Research Network. And we are focused on youth health and wellness in sports. And health and wellness is a wide ranging topic. And right now we're really focused on mental health and physical health in kids. As sports are being taken away during the fall, we're finding that there are skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, substance abuse, deaths due to gun violence, because they don't have alternatives to sports that are safe. And my nonprofit is partnered with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers, particularly the Zach Ertz Family Foundation from Philadelphia and the Jerome Bettis, the Bus Stops Here Foundation out of Pittsburgh, to institute programs within those two cities for inner city kids at risk that will allow them to participate in something meaningful during the day after school gets out, safe places to go to do homework, places to work out, ability to have materials to do homework, food, transportation, all the things you need for general security of a child's life. This is very exciting. Dick's Sporting Goods has very generously made a donation to our efforts, and that's been very exciting. And we've been able to help a lot of people in both of those cities. We hope to take that to the rest of the country as a model as to how competitive teams can work together for their communities. So I'm very excited about that. That's kind of the long, I guess I went a little long on that story, Zach. You should have cut me off, but we're here to talk about sleep. And I'm gonna try to share my screen here and take you through sleep. The importance of sleep. This is a topic that I came about being interested in through again, a very circular kind of pathway. Sleep is something very mysterious. We don't really understand it, even though we study it. We have scientific sleep studies set up. We can measure different biochemicals in your blood. We can videotape you sleeping. There's a lot of things we can understand about the brain and the rest of your body that's happening when you're sleeping, but the actual role of it, it's quite a mystery. With the importance of dreaming, what do dreams mean? Why do we dream? Why do we sleep? How does it affect our bodies? And we do know that sleep is a very important part of our general health, because when you don't get enough sleep, there are a number of potentially fatal diseases and conditions that you can develop as a direct result. So what I'm going to try to do today is take you through kind of how I came about an understanding of sleep, and give you some actionable points that you can think about as you go through your day, and try to alter your lifestyle or think about your lifestyle, and how that affects your sleep. I say that your ability to sleep well at night starts when you wake up. And I figured this out myself, is just trying to hack my own health and find better ways to recover as I got older, and continued to do sports and other activities that were starting to take a toll on me. The stress of life, being a parent, being married, being a doctor, all the things that can weigh you down during the day directly affect your sleep at night. And I came to the realization that I can positively affect my health, feel better, work out better, live better, be a better person, all by doing nothing, basically by going to sleep. And the things I can do during the day to help that is what I'm going to try to talk about here. And to do that, I'm going to go through a few scientific principles of sleep. We're going to talk about the stages of sleep so you can understand what those are and how those are affected by lack of sleep. The sleep cycle. We're going to talk about a little bit of the metabolism, how the neuroendocrine system works, and how chronic inflammatory conditions exist as a result of lack of sleep. We're going to talk about how those affect your health and can develop into problematic health situations. Try to give you some tips on how to sleep better, and everybody has a tip they want to give you. How to sleep, we'll go through some of them. A lot of it is going to be just evaluating your day, and I'll talk a little bit about how I track my sleep. And to Zach's story about the boat, it's really ironic that I probably had one of the worst night's sleep I've had in a really long time last night, and I can tell you why at the end of the talk. I'm kind of using myself as a case study here. There are two main categories of sleep. We have REM sleep and non-REM sleep, and we cycle through them over the course of the night when we're asleep. And the stages of sleep are sort of have been defined by what happens to your brain waves when you're asleep. So what happens is they put these little electrodes on your head, and they'll measure what your brain waves, your electric impulses are doing inside of your brain. And through each phase of sleep, your brain waves will change, and they separated those off into 4 stages of sleep. You may come across 5 stages of sleep. Some of the older references still go talk about 5 stages. Some of the more recent references talk about 4 stages of sleep. It's the same thing. You start off with a drowsy type of sleep when you're just falling asleep, and you transition into deep sleep and then REM sleep. So 5 stages, 4 stages, the same idea and same process. So you may hear and see both of those. Stage 1 happens just as you're falling asleep. Your brain waves begin to slow down. You just start to kind of disengage from your day. Your mind is starting to separate from your body. Your heartbeat and breathing rates begin to slow. Your muscles begin to relax. That's the stage if you just fall asleep and you get those muscle jerks and you kind of jolt yourself back awake. That's usually a sleep 1 or stage 1 sleep phenomena. Stage 2 is you're starting to transition from that light sleep of stage 1 into a more deeper stage, which is stage 3. So stage 2 is really a transition. During this time, you have an even further decrease in your heart rate and breathing rate. Your muscles continue to relax. Your body temperature drops. Your eye muscles begin to become somewhat paralyzed, so they don't move. And your brainwave activity begins to slow down as you transition into stage 3 sleep, which is deep sleep. This is one of the most important phases of sleep. It is vital to have a complete stage 3 sleep in order to feel rested when you wake up in the morning. It's where a lot of the regenerative processes of our physiology happens is during stage 3. It's important for memory consolidation, for critical thinking development, um, uh, for memory, putting short-term memory into long-term memory, and your muscles become at their absolute most paralyzed point. You're beginning to completely separate your mind from your body here, which is good because when you start to dream, like we will see with REM sleep, you don't want to be acting out your dreams. So it's good to disengage your muscles from your brain at this point in time. Well, stage 4, some people may call this stage 5, REM sleep. It's called REM sleep because of rapid eye movement. Your eyes will move back and forth very rapidly while you sleep. This is where you will experience dreams. Your brainwave activity at this point is more like being awake than at any point in time in your sleep cycle. It occurs about 90 minutes after falling asleep, and the amount of time you spend in REM will increase over the course of the night. Again, REM sleep is also really important. It's part of that deep sleep that we need to help particularly consolidate memories. Again, a part of that critical thinking development. A lot of the neuroplasticity things that we need to have happen in our brain as we develop and continue to develop even through adulthood happen during the stage 3 and stage 4 sleep. We'll cycle through each one of those 4 or 5 stages throughout the entire night. You'll go through 4 to 6, depending on how long you sleep. Cycles from stage 1 through REM, stage 1 through REM, so you'll cycle through. As you can see on this diagram here, and when you're awake, you'll cycle through 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up through REM. And as you go through the evening and you start to go through more cycles of sleep, notice that the amount of time you're spending in deep sleep, which is from stage 3 over, is starting to increase. The amount of time you spend in REM sleep is also starting to increase. So the longer you're able to sleep, the more time you're going to be spending in stage 3, stage 4, or what we consider deep sleep, which is the most important part of the restorative and regenerative functions of your body that are going to occur in those phases. So if you cut those short, you're going to cut your regenerative processes of your body down. It's vital for recovery. When we sleep, a lot of physiological changes happen in our body. Our basic metabolic rate is going to decrease by about 15%. So we'll still have a high energy demand, but we're going to focus a lot of the energy on restoring our muscles. When we're going to start to build, repair muscles, we're going to start storing glucose in our liver, getting it into our muscles as glycogen to use for the next day. We're going to be getting rid of waste products. Neurons are going to begin to repair the myelin insulation that surrounds the nerve to help nerve conduction. All the repair that happens in your body happens at sleep, and particularly in those deep sleep stage 3, stage 4. It's called the healing stage of sleep because that's where your repair happens. So you work out, you injure your muscles in the gym, you repair them when you sleep. So the real growth from working out happens during stage 3, stage 4 sleep. If we don't sleep well, if we don't cycle through those stages of sleep in an appropriate way, we have interrupted sleep or fragmented sleep, there are a number of negative health consequences, and the negative effects of lack of sleep can be seen on every tissue in the human body. We can have issues with memory, and that can become a chronic thing that can lead to neurodegenerative diseases. We have emotional issues, depression, anxiety, mood changes, trouble thinking and concentrating. You know, I know from talking to Zach about being a resident, I remember days where I couldn't remember where I parked my car coming into the hospital. I ended up having to park in a very secluded part of a parking lot, so I'm in the same spot every single day just so I could remember where I parked my car. Accidents, because of that confusion and inattention, you're more likely to have accidents, whether it be motor vehicle accidents, bicycle accidents, falls. You have weakened immune system, both innate and adaptive. Your natural body linings and your first responder cells, like your neutrophils, won't function as properly. Your adaptive immunity, which will be your T cells trying to fight off infections that come in, won't function as they should. Lack of sleep has been associated with high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, whether it be atherosclerosis in your heart, which can lead to a heart attack, or in your brain, which can lead to a stroke. It's been linked to risk for diabetes, weight gain, low sex drive. I already said risk of heart disease, and poor balance. Athletes who don't get adequate sleep or have long travel schedules, you see a high incidence of injuries, and then particularly hamstrings, knee injuries, things like that, because the proprioception, which is their ability to tell where they are in space, is altered from a lack of sleep. To kind of understand how that happens, I'm going to go a little bit into your metabolic regulation when you sleep. I said your metabolic rate drops by about 15% when you sleep. You are not consuming as much oxygen because your breathing rate has decreased. So you're shifting your metabolism a little bit away from what we use during the day, which is glucose, your blood glucose levels, and we go into more of a fat burning phase. And we'll probably talk about this when we get into diet and nutrition coming up in one of the other talks. But you could think of the energy systems of the body as being a three-pronged approach. You have the phosphocreatine system, which is like, we just had our chimneys cleaned today, so I'm thinking of my fireplace. If you light a match to start a fire, it's quick burning, very fast. That's phosphocreatine. Super short bursts of energy. That's where you get your phosphocreatine energy into your muscles. The second is glucose, and we burn glucose for energy. And that would be like lighting my newspaper to put it in the wood to start the fire. It's a little bit longer burning. Still, when you light a piece of newspaper, you know it's going to go fast. It's exactly what happens with glucose. Fat, on the other hand, is a very slow burning material. And it would be like lighting the log. Your fireplace or your campfire can, once you get it lit, will burn for a very long period of time without having to do anything. That happens at night. At night, we shift to a lot of beta oxidation of fatty acids, which helps obviously increase fat loss when you sleep. It's a very long burning. To sleep for 8 hours, you need to have something that will burn for 8 hours, and that tends to be fat. You also don't want to use up a lot of glucose when you're sleeping, because you want to put that back into your muscles for glycogen to use tomorrow when you wake up to be able to do what you need to do. You don't want to be burning those materials. So when you sleep, you're going to have two really kind of big hormones that are going to control a lot of this. One of them is growth hormone. And you can see on this little graph, you have your stages of sleep, and below here are your sleep cycles. The dark purple line is when you're in REM sleep. And when you fall asleep into those first early cycles of going through stage 1 through REM sleep, you have a peak of growth hormone. Growth hormone is going to be anabolic. That's going to help you build muscle, help you repair your tissues, do all the things you need to do to build the tissue up. It's the opposite of catabolism. And catabolism is when you start to break tissues down. And if we don't have this peak in growth hormone, our tissues will not regenerate, they'll begin to break down, and you end up in an unhealthy situation. I can't quite see it because my screen's blocked by my face, which is great to see. But the cortisol peak that comes later on in the night is really what's getting you ready to wake up. What's going to happen when the cortisol comes up, it's going to prevent insulin from shuttling glucose into your liver, into your muscles. It's going to elevate your blood glucose levels so that when you wake up, you have enough blood glucose to energize your muscles so you can go about your day, go get your breakfast, and get ready for your day. When we don't sleep, these hormone patterns are altered. And here they are, is basically how I explained them. Here's your growth hormone peak, and these are minutes after falling asleep. Here's your cortisol levels going up gradually over the course of the night as you're transitioning from sleep into wakefulness later on. We'll talk about interleukin or IL-6 here in just a minute. But I just wanted to show you the comparison. And the other side here on the right is what happens when you're sleep deprived. You don't get that growth hormone spike when you need it to be able to repair your tissues. It comes later on when you're trying to wake up, which isn't going to be very helpful. And your cortisol levels, you don't get that big bump that you need to try to really get your blood glucose level up to wake up. What's going to happen is not on this graph, is that cortisol level is going to maintain at that elevated level for most of that morning and into the afternoon. And there can be a number of issues associated with high levels of free cortisol from sleep deprivation. And you can see from this graph, you're going to have decrease in neurogenesis. That means my neurons can't repair themselves. My immune function is going to not be great. My growth hormone is going to drop. I'm going to have an increase in blood pressure. There's going to be, over time, chronically, I'm going to have increased adiposity around my abdomen. That means increased belly fat. And these can lead to things like fractures, fragile bones, cardiovascular disease, memory loss, infections. Most importantly, chronic inflammation can be the end result of this. So we have this altered metabolism that's happening with our glucose, our insulin, from growth hormone and cortisol. We can also have problems with our sympathetic nervous system. And this is taken from people who are alcohol dependent, but you get the same kind of shift for people who are not alcohol dependent. And alcohol is another one of those factors that can affect your sleep negatively if you have it within a few hours of going to bed, for part of this reason. If this is the normal sleep pattern of epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is essentially adrenaline. So think about your adrenal glands above your kidneys, the fight or flight, somebody drops a book and you hear that loud bang and you get that fright response. That's epinephrine and norepinephrine. And you can imagine if you have elevated levels of that when you're sleeping, you're not going to be able to sleep. The other consequence for that is that you're having constriction of your blood vessels. So your arteries aren't going to work the way they're supposed to, which increases your risk of having heart disease. And it also elevates your blood pressure, so you'll have high blood pressure. I mentioned interleukin 6 a little while ago. This is a very important chemical that's in your blood that helps moderate inflammatory responses. And high levels of IL-6, interleukin 6, are seen with chronic inflammatory conditions. And if you think this bottom line here is with you having a normal amount of sleep, appropriate sleep, you can see you do have some fluctuation normally of interleukin 6 as your immune system begins to do what it needs to do at night to repair and regenerate your tissues. But you also, if you are sleep deprived, get this giant spike, which can then stimulate an increased immune response to something, and you end up with a chronic inflammatory condition. And a lot of these diseases that we're talking about associated with lack of sleep, heart disease, stroke, dementia, are all centered around the philosophy or the idea, the concept of being the result of chronic inflammation. There's another inflammatory marker called C-reactive protein, CRP, which is also measured sometimes when people are trying to evaluate if you have a chronic inflammatory condition. And with sleep deprivation, you see this very sharp line upwards. If you don't sleep, you have high levels of CRP. So lack of sleep and chronic inflammation seem to be the connecting two dots in the line for lack of sleep and disease, whether it's in your heart or your brain or wherever. So consequences of lack of sleep, they're far-reaching. You've lost your metabolic regulation, which affects your insulin and glucose levels, sets you up for the potential to have type 2 diabetes and heart disease. You have loss of immune regulation, which can tip the balance from appropriate immune responses, which are important for repair, to exaggerated immune responses, which can damage tissue and lead to disease like Alzheimer's disease. And then you have loss of neuroendocrine regulation, which is increased sympathetic nervous system response. So you have a high level of adrenaline in your system when you're trying to sleep, which can have negative effects. In short, sleep deprivation, dysregulation of neuroendocrine, increased nocturnal sympathetic innervation, chronic inflammation, all lead to disease. This is the pathway from sleep deprivation to disease. The problem becomes even more exaggerated when your lack of sleep becomes a chronic thing. And this blue arrow is showing you if you increase the amount of time you're going without sleep, you're having an insufficient recovery and you're having an exaggerated response of inflammatory mediators that are leading to a chronic phase of inflammation as you're having a chronic lack of sleep. So the longer you go without sleeping, or the more chronic your sleep disturbances are, the more far-reaching your exaggerated damaging immune response is. There's some interaction between these things too. I mean, when you have a decreased sleep here, and you can see where I'm trying to circle it, you're having glucose intolerance and insulin insufficiency. And both of those conditions have consequences on all of our organ systems. And it isn't just developing into type 2 diabetes. They also stimulate a lot of these bad things to happen in the brain. And what'll happen is with high insulin resistance and high levels of glucose, proteins begin to deposit in your brain. And along with the high glucose levels and deposition of proteins comes the inflammation, comes the protein accumulations, the pathologic protein accumulations that you see with diseases like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. So they may interact with each other. They're not separate pathways here. Everything is interconnected within the brain and the body. What happens in your brain affects everything that happens in your body. Everything that happens in your body affects everything that happens in your brain. And I think this diagram shows that. Sleep deprivation in the brain, you'll have a high level of inflammatory cytokines that will affect the neuron, cause these abnormal proteins to accumulate, and then you'll end up with cognitive impairments, dementias, vascular diseases, all kinds of bad things that can happen in the brain. And here's sort of one of the theories that's going around in the literature that I think is really valid. When you have sleep alterations, when you don't sleep well, that you have some cognitive issues. You may not remember things. You may forget where you put things. These sort of everyday things that happen, but they become problems that can develop over time into mild cognitive impairment, which is sort of an early dementia, and then into Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. As you progress through a neurodegenerative disease, and many people who do have neurodegenerative diseases have sleep issues. And it's always thought that, well, the Alzheimer's disease is causing the sleep issue. But now people are starting to think, I mean scientists, that it's the sleep alterations and fragmentations that are leading to the protein depositions and the chronic inflammation, and therefore the dementia within the brain. This is taken from the National Academy of Sciences, and you can see the red stuff is beta amyloid accumulation within the brain after one night of poor sleep. And if you get good sleep and you can recover over the next couple of days, that beta amyloid protein can get washed away. Your brain has a lot of mechanisms to be able to deal with it. But if you continue to have chronic loss of sleep, this protein can't get cleaned out, it can't get flushed out, and it will build up, and it can have consequences for your memory. And it isn't just these biological processes of neurodegenerative disease, it's also associated with a lot of the neuropsych issues, depression, anxiety. Same idea. These are the same pathways we just talked about. We have interleukin 6, we have our sleep disturbances, our increased sympathetic nervous system, and NF-kappa B is a molecule in the body that will help to express pro-inflammatory genes, will increase chronic inflammation within the body. So there's this inflammatory theory underlying some of our neuropsychological issues like depression, anxiety, through those identical pathways that we've seen earlier in this talk. So how much sleep do you need, and what do you have to do to maintain a proper sleep hygiene? It's suggested you get about 8 hours of sleep a night. If you're getting about 8 hours of sleep a night, somewhere between 15 to 25% of that is going to be spent in deep sleep, which is what you really need. It's the long-term issues with lack of deep sleep or fragmentation of deep sleep that is going to have a negative impact on your health, whether it's heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, or any other neurodegenerative condition. You have to go through all 4 stages sequentially through the night without interruption. And that seems to be the takeaway from this, is that all stages are important. You can't fall asleep, get up, go do something, fall back asleep, because you're not gonna go through those much needed deep phases of sleep. Why do I wake up tired? How come when I wake up, I'm still exhausted, and Monday I should be more rested? How come I was tired on Monday as I was on Friday? It's because you're not getting that 25 to 15 to 25% of deep sleep. You may be only getting 10%, 8% of your sleep may actually be in that deep sleep. You're not getting enough, and that's why you may be feeling tired. That's all well and good, but how do I change that, and what can I do to see if it's working? And I think those are the important points and why everybody is here today. But I think if you understand there are 4 stages of sleep, we have to cycle through them many times through the night, uninterrupted. If they're interrupted, we alter our metabolism, we have increased inflammation, and our sympathetic nervous system is overactive. To get better sleep, everybody probably can recite these 10 things um, over and over again. But like I said, how you sleep starts with how you wake up. And everything you do in the day is going to impact how you sleep. I'll show you some examples in a minute. So one of the most important things, establish a regular sleep and wake time. I try to do that every single day, no matter what the day is. I try to go to bed at the same time, and I try to wake up at the same time, even on the weekends. I try to maintain a schedule. It allows my body to be able to know what's coming. There's no surprises, and that type of routine is very important to developing a sleep routine. You know, because I want to be able to have the discipline to go to bed at the exact same time every night, because I know that I do. If I do, I get up at the same time. I know I have this window of time where I'm going to be able to cycle through all of those phases of sleep as I need. Limit alcohol and caffeine. We're all grown-ups. Life happens. We know that this is not always possible. If you're going to drink caffeine, try to have a cutoff time sometime in the early part of the afternoon. I try not to have a cup of coffee after 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. If I have one later, I know that it will negatively affect my sleep. Alcohol, try to limit alcohol in the few hours before bed. Again, it will, as you saw from that diagram, it will increase your sympathetic tone. Even though you feel relaxed and you may have a couple of drinks, I think I'm going to have a glass of whiskey or wine, it's going to help me fall asleep. That may be true in that moment. You may feel more relaxed, but as that alcohol gets metabolized, you're having the rebound effect from your sympathetic nervous system. You're going to wake up. You're going to have restless sleep. So think about your alcohol consumption on nights before you go to bed. My personal rule that I find works well for me is part of the problem with alcohol is it dehydrates you. It's a diuretic. So when you drink alcohol, you'll have to go to the bathroom and you'll lose a lot of water out of your tissues. The water is very important for your health. It's as important as sleep. So one alcoholic drink is 2 bottles of water for me. So if I have a beer, I'm drinking 2 bottles of water. If I drink, I drink, my body weight in ounces of water every day anyway, but I always try to add extra water if I'm going to have a couple of drinks. And I try to limit my alcohol to Friday or Saturday nights. And I try to limit it to 1 or 2 drinks. But I always have water with it to prevent that dehydration. And I find that helps protect my sleep. Again, all of this I've developed trying to hack my sleep so I can sleep better. I find that works for me. Keep it cool. I personally prefer a cooler bedroom. I can't sleep if it's too hot. I think that having the room temperature a little bit cooler at night also helps sleep. In the summer, everybody tosses and turns and doesn't sleep well. I think cooler temperatures are better for sleep. No screens. Try not to watch anything on, your television, iPad, iPhone, whatever your device is, Android, in the hour or so before you go to bed. The blue light can really affect your brain and your ability to relax. It can affect your neurotransmitters. It can cause the secretion of excitatory neurotransmitters, and that can really affect your sleep because your brain is starting to get wired. So no screens. Exercise. Try not to exercise in the couple hours before bed, because as you exercise, you'll have a rebound responsive sympathetic nervous system, growth hormone, cortisol, and those things can affect your sleep negatively. If you do exercise earlier in the day, you're still going to get the same result of being tired in the evening. You'll pay that debt off. There are a lot of studies out there that show morning exercise and the way that your metabolism responds is that you will have a crash in the evening and go to sleep. So exercise whenever you can get it in, but try to keep it a couple hours before you go to bed. Don't exercise and then go to bed. Whole food and plant-based diets. That's really trying to stay away from processed foods. They're not good for you in any way, shape, or form. If you can't pronounce the ingredients on something, you probably shouldn't be eating it. In my family, we have a primarily plant-based diet. Everything is surrounded by, I always joke to say I'm vegan-ish, but we're really focused on plant-based food, particularly whole, organic, locally grown food. If you can get it, is always the best, particularly um, in view of what processed foods do to you. And there is a tremendous amount of science out there that will show you that processed sugars, salt, um, it can really wreak havoc on your metabolism, your glucose levels, and particularly cause a chronic inflammatory condition throughout the entire body. And when you eat gummy bears or ice cream, or these things that we like to eat occasionally, they have super physiological levels of sugar. It's not the same as eating a banana. I mean, everybody seems to be carb phobic, carbohydrate phobic, and there's no need to be. But you need to stay away from consuming large amounts of Coke, ice cream, gummy bears, whatever um, those sugars are, particularly before you go to bed. And watch what you eat before you go to bed. Again, we're talking about a very tightly regulated system here of growth hormone, cortisol, and glucose and insulin. If you have a bowl of ice cream and you get that big carbohydrate spike before you go to bed, you're going to alter that entire process. Your body is going to use, it's the ultimate recycling machine. If you have a dump of glucose into your bloodstream, when you are going to bed, your body is going to use it, and you're not going to burn the fat that you want to burn, and the fat that you need to burn to support the energy of regeneration of your tissues. So be careful what you eat and when you eat. For myself, what I found made the biggest difference for me, and everybody's different. This may not work for you, may not apply to you, but take a look at your lifestyle and try things. For me, I found eating with the sun was the most effective way for me to be healthy. I start, it's sort of a type of intermittent fasting, but I eat, in the morning after my workout, and I try to not eat anything after 6 or 7 o'clock at night when the sun goes down. So I eat with the sun. It helps me be able to regulate and try not to eat a bunch of stuff before I a bunch of Oreos or something before I go to bed, which is a story I'll get to in a minute. Stay hydrated. Again, goes back into the alcohol, caffeine, chronic inflammation. Everything's coming back to hydration. Staying properly hydrated, keeping the water in your tissues is going to help them flush out metabolic waste. It's going to help them rebuild and repair from what you did during the day. Hydration is the most important, I think, cornerstone of all of this. We're chronically dehydrated, and it's recommended that you drink about 8 ounces of water per kilogram of body weight. I drink about and I think that's an underestimate. I drink an ounce of water per pound of body weight. The American College of Sports Medicine suggests adding about 12 ounces of water to your life per half hour of exercise. So if you work out for an hour, you've got to add an extra 24 ounces of water to your life. You'll find that if you do start drinking water constantly, you'll never ever see me without a bottle of water in my hand. You won't wake up in the middle of the night going pee all the time. People say, "Oh, if you drink that much water, you must be up all night going pee." Like, no, that happens when I have sleep disturbances. If something wakes me up, that's when the urge to go to the bathroom happens. I don't wake up because of the urge to go to the bathroom. But if you're adequately hydrated, that water's in your tissues, not getting filtered out. If I drink, 180 ounces of water today, and then I go have 3 beers tonight, that's going to keep me awake. I'm going to be in the bathroom a couple times in the night. That's how you affect your sleep negatively with these things. So stay hydrated, keep the diuretics down. The other thing, and I am really guilty of this, is bedroom only for sleep. Do not work in your bedroom. Try to keep it, I say bedroom only, or, sexy time, fun time with your partner. No work. And I get into bed with my laptop and I'll finish a project or return a couple emails. And I try not to do that. We try to make the bedroom just for sleep, reading, relaxing things, try to keep it a fun environment, not full of stress, those kind of things. The other thing I think is really important for the beginning and the end of your day is practice mindfulness. My family and I would go through a ritual every night where no matter what, we will list 5 things in our day that we're grateful for. There's always something in our day to be thankful for. Regardless of how crappy that day may have been, or no matter what has happened to us, there's always 5 things we can find. Same thing in the morning. Before I wake up, I think of what a great opportunity I have for this day ahead of me. How lucky I am to have my family, have my friends, the things I have in my life, the ability to connect with you and Zach, all these great things today. I couldn't wait to think about my day today. practice mindfulness. When you wake up, set the tone for your day. It's gonna, I don't care what you have to do. There's been days I know that I had a ton of stuff I got to do and I was dreading it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go to work. But that's not the right attitude. Positive mindset is going to take you a long way, not just in the rest of your day, but into your sleep. You got a lot of challenges. You're going to tackle them. You're going to get through it. You've already lived through 100% of your worst days. So keep yourself positive, practice mindfulness, think about what you're doing during the course of your day, and it's going to help you sleep better. One of the things that I started to do, and this is how can I tell if this is working? How much time am I spending? How do I know, Pete? How do I know how much time I'm spending in stage 3? How do I know I'm spending any time in deep sleep? There are a number of wearable devices out there now that do a really wonderful job at tracking these things. And I became really obsessed with my sleeping heart rate. And for a long time, and a lot of you who are interested in health know that resting heart rate was kind of the gold standard for measuring health. And when the resting heart rate would be when you first wake up in the morning, before you begin to move around in your day, you just measure your pulse, count your pulse. And the lower that number, the better indicator of health. The higher that number, you started to develop risk of negative health consequences, such as cardiovascular disease. Sleeping heart rate is exactly what it sounds like. I wear my Apple Watch when I go to bed, and I look at what my lowest heart rate was in the course of the night. That's my sleeping heart rate, whatever my lowest level was. It's that simple to figure out. There's a ton of work out there right now in the science world looking at the effects of sleeping heart rate on health, and finding that if you have alterations in the dip of your heart rate at night, where it's not getting down into a low level or a low value, you're increased risk for the same diseases that you would see with resting heart rate. And it's super easy to measure if you have a wearable device. More than that, what I've found is that the pattern of your sleeping heart rate is just as important. It isn't just what my lowest value of my pulse is at night. It's what's my heart rate doing as I cycle through my sleep. And I found 3 basic patterns of heart rate from my own life. And these are from screen captures from my phone. And this first one is called the crash. And you can see it's got this straight line coming down of my heart rate. This is something that I see with extreme exhaustion and stress. If I've at the end of a really grueling cycle of some workout and I haven't, had the recovery that I need, metabolic stresses, physiological stresses, mental stresses, when I'm exhausted, I see this, and I know something isn't right in my life. And it provides me the immediate feedback of that next morning. When I look and I see this pattern, I can think back to my day before and go, okay, I know why that happened. This is what was going on in my day. This is what has affected my heart rate. So now I know some variables that I can change from the current day and the next day to help change this heart rate pattern. The next pattern I call the tidal wave. It kind of looks like a tidal wave. I know, Zach, you could probably tell us from your experience that looks like a swell. But this is also something I see when I haven't eaten well. This will be usually I will fill up on junk foods on Fridays, my cheat day, and have some pizza, a couple of beers. This is what my heart rate might look like on a Saturday. Something that acute, that minor, a meal on Saturday can have this kind of impact on my sleep, and I might not sleep very well. And I know that, so that motivates me. I want to feel really good on Saturday. I want to feel really good on Sunday. I want to feel really good on Monday. So I know that sort of rewards me over time as I form the habit of the discipline of being able to say on Friday night, nope, I'm stopping at 2 beers. Nope, I'm stopping at 2 glasses of wine. I'm only having a couple pieces of pizza and maybe a couple of cookies. I don't, go overboard, because I know that this is going to be an issue. That being said, life happens. Eat the cookie, right? Eat the cake. You only live once, so don't get obsessive about it. Do the best you can. I know I know what variables I need to change in my day to prevent this kind of heart rate pattern and for me to get restful sleep. This is what you want to see. I call it the smiley face. And this is the transition from wakefulness to deep sleep, all the way up to wakefulness again. This is what I want to see. I want to see a gradual decrease in my heart rate and a gradual increase in my heart rate. And I want it to look like this. This is when I know I've had a good day. I've been on point. Everything's been, the way I'd hoped and planned. And this is what it looks like. Doesn't always happen. I don't always get this. I don't get this every single day because, again, I live in a very dynamic world like the rest of you do, and life happens and you have to adjust and adapt. But this is my goal. And if I don't see this, then I know something from the previous day. I can look back, see where the alteration was in my pattern, in my day, in my habit, and try to mitigate that for the next couple of days so I can get good sleep. This is another app that I've used. I think it's called Sleepwatch. I don't know. There's a bunch of them out there. I'm not promoting one over another. I used a bunch of them. This is just one I happened to grab. This is good because it'll tell me how many hours of total sleep I got. And back on May 12th, I got 9 hours of sleep. I don't know how that happened, but that's fantastic. I set a goal for 8 hours every day. I've been on target for 3 days. So I have immediate feedback when I get up in the morning. This is one of the first things I check. This will tell me down here in this little box what my sleeping pattern was. It will tell me my light versus restful sleep. It'll tell me if I was interrupted at any point in time. My son coming in the middle of the night, the dog coming in, or the dog needing to go out. These things can interrupt you. It also gives me this little thing right here. It tells me the total amount of percentage of my sleep that is spent in restful sleep, which is deep sleep. So I know exactly what I have for deep sleep when I wake up in the morning. This is a great way to start looking at your day. If you have a wearable device, find an app that you like, that's aesthetically pleasing to you, that's simple to use, that has these things in it, and start tracking your sleep. Look at the next day and think about, okay, what did I do yesterday? All right, this is what happened. This is what my heart rate looked like. This is what my heart rate pattern was. All right, let me make some changes in my day and see if that happens, if I can affect anything. You'll be surprised over time how you can, with a little bit of instantaneous information, you can make some very important changes in your habits in life. If I tap on the bar that tells me my sleeping pattern, this is what I want to see. The time scale is such that it looks like a flat line. But if I look at it in a different scale, it'll look a lot like what we saw with the Apple Watch. I'll have a nice smiley face. But the gist is here, I'm not having wild variations in my heart rate, which is what I want to see. Compare that to the night of April 15th or 16th, where I had a terrible night's sleep. I'll go back. You can see I had a whole bunch of variations in my heart rate. I had poor sleep, had poor recovery. I don't recall what was happening on this day at this point, but something happened and I didn't sleep very well. And I was interrupted in the middle of the night for something, for whatever reason. The next day I felt tired, I was dragging, and I captured this screenshot. This is my sleeping patterns since April. And you can see that the amount of time that I have spent sleeping is going down. My quality, my quantity of sleep has been decreasing. Stressed out. This is called life, right? We all are living it. Things happen. It's about this time my family and I decided we were going to move. We're going to sell our house. We're going to buy a new house. Trying to sell the house, get our house ready, get a mortgage, move into the new place. So get my kid into a new school. All the things that happen in your everyday life are going to affect your sleep. And here I've had a decrease in my total amount of time sleeping, but during this period, I've been able to maintain a good quality of sleep. I'm still getting enough deep sleep to not feel horrible the next day. But sometimes these cycles can run in long periods and you have to deal with them and not get too obsessed and beat yourself up about it. It's an opportunity to engage with your life and your world. I'm aware of the things that are happening to me externally, being aware of that and knowing that it is affecting me. That's okay. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay that I've got a basal level of stress about something that's above normal. And I know that it allows me to understand how I react to situations. It allows me to react better with, things that will stress me out, trying to get my son off the Xbox or, different things that happen. I understand that this very stressful situation helps me navigate my day in a much more calm and productive way when I understand that I'm stressed. It's okay to be stressed. So practice what you preach a little bit here, right? I mean, I'm not sleeping great, but I'm getting good quality sleep, just not sleeping a lot because life happens. This was last night. I had a horrible night's sleep last night, October 25th and 26th. And, what happened last night was, again, I'm not a perfect person. I never will claim to be, but there were some great football games on yesterday afternoon. I ate a lot of junk food. Why not? It was Sunday. It was a beautiful day. I was having a great time. And, I stayed up too late watching football. I had some Oreos way past my general fast cutoff time. And I went to bed right after a very exciting football game, where you're, jazzed up and I'm watching screens right up until the time I go to bed. And it took me some time to fall asleep. And then this is what happens to me that night. So I know, ate some junk yesterday. I watched TV too late. I stayed up too late. I was too excited when I went to bed after watching something really dramatic. And that affected my sleep last night. So I know that. I know what the factors were. I know tonight I'm going to try to get the best I can to get back to bed at my usual time and get back up in the morning at my usual time. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it. Because I had a great time and I enjoyed the day and I enjoyed watching football with some family, and I'll take a poor night's sleep over the great fun I had with friends and family. So one more slide here, and then we can get back to Zach. Why the reason why you're all here, and I'll try to hit some questions up while Zach's talking. Napping. A lot of questions come up about napping. Is it okay to nap? Is some old mythology or old wives' tales that if you nap, you ruin your sleep? It's not necessarily true. And now that you have the knowledge of sleep cycles and stages of sleep, you can be empowered in understanding how you nap. It seems that about 20-minute power nap is really good. You can wake up and you haven't transitioned into that full deep sleep yet. So you're going to wake up, you'll feel alert, you'll be ready to go do what you're going to do. You're going to feel rested. 20 minutes seems to be a really good nap time. Once you get into 30 minutes, you start waking up a little bit more groggy. You start slipping into those deeper sleep stages. 60 minutes is a little worse. You'll get sleep inertia because you're waking up as you're transitioning into deep sleep. And you know what happens when you wake up in deep sleep? You're groggy. You can't wait. You don't feel rested. The nap. How many times you taken a nap and been like, "I didn't work. I'm still tired. I take another nap after my nap." It's because you woke up in the middle of a sleep cycle. Your 20-minute sleep seems to be where you're at. The other end of that spectrum is a 90-minute nap, which I think, unless it's a weekend, is kind of impractical for me. That allows you to go through a full cycle. I can't do that usually during the week. I can easily sneak in a 20-minute nap somewhere. And there are many days of the week that I do. Napping is good. Especially if you have children. I remember from when my son was a baby, somebody told me the best parent advice I ever received was don't listen to any advice people give you about being a parent. But one thing that I always used to say is sleep when the baby sleeps. And that made a big difference for me. But, at the time I was also like Zach, we were residents, and working 100-hour, 80-hour work weeks and having a newborn was brutal. So you slept whenever you could and give yourself a break. I remember my wife beating herself up about all the things she had to do and around the house, and the baby was napping. Now I've got to clean this. I got to take care of this. I got to go do this. And it just sleep. That'll take, all the other things will take care of themselves. We'll figure out I'll get to the grocery store tonight. Don't worry about it. I can take care of this. But just sleep when the baby sleeps. And I think that'd be my piece of one parenting advice of breaking my rule. Figure it out about 20 minutes. And that's all I got for my little talk. And I hope that was good. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something where you can make some informed decisions about how you go through your day.
That was fantastic, Pierre. We're so grateful for your preparation on that. Thank you, everybody, for such thorough participation during that call. I would like to, instead of adding more detail from my perspective on the endocrine system and stuff like that, I think there's a lot to be gained from the questions that have been asked here. So I think I want to jump right into Q&A here. And Pete, why don't you run through some of those Q&A, and you and I will just tag team picking our favorite questions there that we think we can expound on. But I'll take the first one here because I think it's such a common one. And also I'm excited for the chat session going on back and forth between all of you. I think there's so much that you guys are teaching each other and learning from one another along the chat. So thanks for chatting together. And if you've got questions, throw them into the Q&A section for Pete and I to try to peruse quickly to find the ones that tie as many of your questions together. I think there's a general theme here that runs through a few of the questions that gets at, I sleep, 6, 8, 9 hours a night, and I still wake up groggy no matter what. And I feel like I'm not getting rested when in fact I'm putting an enormous effort into sleep hygiene and eating right and drinking right and doing my meditation. And then I go to sleep and I still wake up feeling groggy in the morning. What's going on there? There's, a huge number of variables involved. And, as a backdrop to that statement, I would say that it's important to realize that sleep is the most complicated thing the brain does. As far as I know, Pete, feel free to weigh in on that differently, but at least from where we were in the 2000s, I know the science is changing recently, but in the 2000s, it was coming to be understood that there was nothing like sleep to demand the coordination of the sheer number of parts of the brain to participate in this thing that we call sleep. So from that standpoint of just number of brain areas coordinating to achieve it, sleep is the most complicated thing you'll do. It's also very important to realize that for that reason of that necessity for massive collaborative kind of symphonic type level of complexity going on in the brain to achieve sleep, it's one of the first things to diminish as we age. Aging is, in the nutshell, the result of two phenomenon inside the cell. One is hydration, and so a chronic slow dehydration event accounts for probably 50% of what we call aging. And the other 50% is intracellular communication or intracellular communication. So it's communication with inside the cell and then across many cells. And so that cell-cell communication combined with dehydration is the hallmark of the aging process. And when you start to lose the cell-cell communication, you start to accumulate damage that's not repairing because you don't know the damage is there. You've got all the machinery for repair. You have all the stem cells ready to go to replace any tissue that can't repair itself. That's the phenomenon when you're 105 years old or 110 and you're dying. It's not because you don't have the assets to repair and live longer. You do. It's because you've become dehydrated chronically inside the cell, combined with this lack of repair. The dehydration leads to toxicity, and so a dehydrated cell has a very difficult time getting out the organic and inorganic toxins that accumulate in a daily process. And so with the accumulation of toxin and decreased communication towards repair, you get the aging phenomenon. And so now imagine the brain aging is now giving you this phenomenon where the accumulation over time starts to give you this fragmented sleep phenomenon or this dysfunctional capacity for coordination of those complex brain environments. So number one, it's not a personal problem, especially when we're aging, to see sleep disorder happen. It's a natural part of the decline of coordinated function within the body. And so for that, we can see it as a symptom, not a disease process over and over again. And that can maybe free you up from thinking, oh my gosh, I have this horrible disorder called insomnia or sleep apnea or bruxism was brought up in one of the questions, which is grinding of the teeth. So you could have these disorders, but to start to realize that any disorder within the sleep environment is simply a symptom of an aging body. It helps us move up the pathway towards saying, why are we aging? And can we get at those fundamentals of dehydration inside the cell, lack of cell-cell communication, and start moving ourselves towards that direction rather than worrying about the sleep as some sort of life-threatening disorder? It certainly correlates with that. It's a symptom that says, if you don't fix these underlying processes or upstream effects, you're going to get the cardiovascular diabetes, the neurodegenerative conditions, and everything else that we've seen in this presentation. But I want you guys to be freed up from realizing you don't have to fix sleep. The sleep is a symptom of that greater environment. So everything that Dr. Cummings just went through is really a great review of the fact that we have an extraordinary number of ways in which to influence the result of sleep. And so I want you guys to think broadly about your life as being there. So why does somebody wake up groggy? One of the reasons is because you can be waking up in the wrong stage of sleep. And so if you, like was mentioned in the napping, you're in a deep phase of sleep. If you're in that stage 3, or when I went through training, it was called stage 4 sleep, that super deep sleep, restorative sleep. right before you go into REM. If you wake up in the midst of that, you're dragging. You feel like you're coming out of a cave, right? You just like, or swimming in molasses. It's so slow. Your physiology is slow to kind of get back connected and find yourself in the day and be able to make executive decisions in your moment to moment. So if that's the case, then it may be useful for you to kind of map in the evening to understand when are you waking up. Because if you wake up every morning because your alarm goes off at 6:30 or whatever it is, and you find yourself groggy all the time, it may be that you're always waking yourself up in stage 3, 4 sleep. And so for that reason, you may want to reinitiate or reevaluate what time you go to bed to understand where your cycles of REM are happening so that you wake up in a REM cycle. If you wake up in REM, it's actually quite easy to kick right into your day compared to coming out of stage 3 sleep. So find out where REM is. There's also the opposite phenomenon that can lead to grogginess, which is you're not getting enough stage 4. So you're getting too much REM. And this is called REM latency disorder, where you have a deficiency of REM early on at night, and then your last phase of sleep, your last 2 phases of sleep often is piled with a bunch of REM stacked in between what should be stage 3 restorative sleep. So trying to wake up in the middle of restorative sleep can lead you groggy, and not getting enough restorative sleep can lead you groggy. And so too much REM or waking up at the wrong moments in those last hours can be some of those causes. And so something like the Oura Ring is mentioned by Pete. And Pete, I think that's what the app you were sharing there is from the Oura Ring. Is that correct?
I mean, that's one of them. I've never used it, but I think what I've seen from there is very similar. But I don't know
Which app were
I
you
don't know
using?
much about it. One's my Apple Watch, and the other one, let me check. I can tell you. I think it's called Sleepwatch. Yeah, it's called Sleepwatch. I mean, there were so many of them on the App
Yeah.
Store. I picked one that looked good to me. I just like the colors.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so you know, when you're using a device, you know, the Oura Ring's been put out there as an option that has less electromagnetic field interaction with the body. So you could take a look if you're concerned about being EMF sensitive and the rest. Frankly, I don't use any of those, you know, so I think it depends on your personality. My data I prefer is the ultra structural stuff around my life, and so I tend to do better with kind of deciding on getting the big data. What time did I fall asleep? What time did I drink? What did I drink last? And what did I eat last? And what was my emotional state going into sleep? And therefore, I had that result. So sometimes it's easier for me personally to, instead of getting tied up in the details of my sleep pattern, get more of the ultra structure information. So this is going to be a personality as to which one you're drawn towards. But for one reason or another, you're going to want to start to think about the possibility if you're putting in the hours in bed but not getting the result of rest, start to think about some of these issues of, am I waking up at the wrong time? Am I going to, therefore that would suggest you're going to sleep at the wrong time. And when I say wrong, it's not really wrong. There's an opportunity for an improved state of sleep if you pick a different hour to go to sleep and wake up. And this is really telling for me. So, one of the blessings I get from travel so much is the experience of being in places in drastically different time zones. And so when I moved from the East Coast to Hawaii time zone, for example, that 6-hour difference I can take advantage of. And so I can say, all right, I'm not going to get up at my usual 6:30 in the morning. I'm going to actually get up at 4 a.m. and I'm actually going to feel pretty well rested because I actually got a couple extra hours compared to my body's, previous clock. And so I can reset easily to a very early awakening time. And for those weeks after arriving from East Coast time into a new time zone, it's very interesting for me to explore. What does it feel like to get up at 4:30 in the morning? What does it feel like to get up at 5 in the morning? What does it feel like to get up 5:30? And where do I start to drop off the functionality in the morning? And is 6:30 or 7 leave me a little bit more groggy than I was at 5:30 in the morning? Things like that. So think about transitions of time zone if you do that in your work or not. But if not, then just transition your go to sleep and fall and waking times sometimes dramatically to give your body a shift. This is similar to fasting. And so the fasting state that we've taken you through a couple months ago, where you're doing your five-day water fast, that experience changes your physiology dramatically. In the same way, if you wake up at 4:30 in the morning, that might sound to you like a ludicrous time to get up in the morning. But in fact, biologically, that's exactly when all of us were waking up before the invention of the light. And so before we had the light bulb from Thomas Edison, we were routinely going to sleep around 8:30 in wintertime, even earlier, and some around move towards this other point of resting. And so it's worthwhile to imagine your life in a pre-technology standpoint, not just from screens, but also light bulbs. And so huge fan of getting away from white light at night and blue light particularly, and moving much more to the red light kind of spectrum. And so that's going to be firelight, candlelight, and some of your deeper red warm light sources. Things like the Himalayan lamp is a good example of being able to create that low wavelength of light late in the evening. So think about the lighting around you and how that's transitioning your night thing. And if you can't get away from white light, then blue blocker glasses are an approach that's been used by the biohacking community and everything else to kind of shift sleep cycles and the like. So removing the blue light, your screens should always have blue light filters on them, especially after 6 p.m. But I'm a fan of blocking blue light from your screens throughout the day. I find that the blue light coming from a screen close to my face is eye fatiguing, brain fatiguing at any point in the day. And so be aware of that potential for blue light fatigue, blue blocker glasses and the like. This brings up the importance of some of the other questions that you have here around EMFs. And I would bring your awareness in the same way to the phase of light that you're interacting with, the electromagnetic field environment. And so there's a number of physiologies out there. In my clinic, it tends to be women, especially the ages kind of 35 to 55 seem to be most sensitive right now. And that may be generational more than age, and meaning that, somebody who's born in World War II era is going to have a different tolerance for these things than somebody who was born in the 1970s, for example. And so the reason for that was age at which your neurologic system got established. So today's children have neurologic systems that were developed within the context of EMFs. And so they may end up having some sort of advantage, or they may just have pure disadvantage in that. But it won't surprise me if we find out that children born in EMF environments figure out how to do sleep better than somebody who developed a neurologic system outside of the context of intense Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and kind of 5G type radiation. Their physiology has to adapt somewhere halfway through life where their neurologic patterns have been developed. And so you may be EMF sensitive just due to the change in the neurologic environment from development to current day. And so if you're EMF sensitive, you'll probably know this through the propensity for chronic fatigue syndromes, chronic pain syndromes, autoimmune conditions. Those seem to all go hand in hand with this sensitivity towards electromagnetic fields. And what's happening in electromagnetic field exposure is very similar to inflammation itself. And so there was a few questions around inflammation and sleep and the relationship between those, or autoimmune disease and sleep. Inflammation, in a nutshell, creates at the physics level, now going deeper than biology down to the atomic structure of our reality, creates dissidence in the waves. And so you can imagine the static on your TV, if you're old enough to have remembered having rabbit ears on your television, you'd turn into CBS and it would be kind of grainy, and so you'd walk over and you adjust your rabbit ears and then it'd become totally clear picture. Stress in the form of stress inflammation or electromagnetic field stress will create the static. And what's happening is it's disrupting the waveforms in which our electromagnetic field resonates, which of course interacts primarily with the water structure of our body. So you've got a water column that's 70% water, by weight, but this water column that we call the human body is picking up the resonance frequencies of everything from your endocrine system to the neurologic system and beyond, and you're getting this waveform phenomenon that we call health. And as you develop a high electromagnetic field environment from Wi-Fi, or a high inflammatory environment from biologic stressors, you start to create chaos in that field, and the water structure starts to deteriorate. And you tend to get a dehydration effect of the cell. When you disrupt the intracellular water structure, which is actually a gel, water inside your cells is not liquid, which is kind of weird to know, but you've seen this in that when you cut your arm, water doesn't come flowing out of that wound. So it's not like the skin is like containing this, this column of liquid water. In fact, it's a gel state, very similar to Jello. It's reached this gel type structure that does not leak in and of itself. But if we disrupt the electrical phenomena that allows that fourth phase of water to occur, we start to get a difficulty of bringing water in and holding water inside the cells. So we start to get leak from the cells. And this leads to an increase in extracellular water, which will then give you the frequent urination and lymphedema kind of patterns, difficulty losing weight is a combination of not just fat cells, but also the accumulation of water, the inability to clear water from the extracellular matrix and the likes. And so in broad brush strokes, I would say that there's an opportunity for you to start to think about your body as a resonance chamber, and the stressors that are around you may be pushing you beyond your physiological limits of coping. And if that's the case, not only do you have poor sleep, you're going to have all these other biologic consequences. And so I know I'm probably starting to confuse the crap out of the majority of you because I've gone too many places here, but the basic concept here that I'm getting at is the environment around you is much bigger than your immediate awareness of your lifestyle and everything else. And so starting to think about yourself as this column of water that's resonating to your environment. And if you see stress-like behavior, which can be frequent urination at night, frequent awakenings and the like, or it can be deep sleep, the difference between those two is going to be that chaos around you. And so if you have a situation where you have symptoms of chaos, i.e. poor sleep, then you need to start to think about all of the things that are influencing your environment. So I'm a huge fan of grounding sheets. Grounding is a very simple way to reduce the electromagnetic field, especially the man-made electromagnetic field around you. It's as simple as it's a sheet that fits over the lower half of your bed, silver threads, plugs into a copper ground rod that goes outside your window and drops into the ground. You push that 14-inch stake into the ground. Now you have a direct link to the electromagnetic field of the planet, which is an infinite number of electrons, ready to neutralize the inflammatory cascades within your body, as well as neutralize at the skin level any externally approaching electromagnetic field, whether that's the smart meter on your home from monitoring your electrical behavior in the home, or your Wi-Fi device, or your Apple Watch that you're wearing. Any of these things stops at the skin. By grounding the skin, you create a Faraday cage, and a Faraday cage blocks any external EMF at that point. So the skin cannot just be a barrier against toxins, it can be a barrier against electromagnetic field if grounded. During the day, barefoot is a powerful tool, right? And so the more time you spend barefoot and in touch with something of the earth, which actually cement works quite well for grounding, asphalt doesn't work at all. So as long as you're on a cement sidewalk or brick, or certainly your clay pathways, things like that. If you're on a walking path in the woods, or if you're in your backyard, in the garden, on the grass, etc., you're going to be grounded instantly, which means Faraday cage is around you, which is very encouraging in an environment that's, we're also concerned about 5G and all these other radiation sources. You can stop that at the skin by grounding. And so I want you to all feel empowered to change what's happening to this column of water that is your body. You can start to resonate inside of it. And to finish this thought, one of the early questions was, how does your spiritual sense of self and your sense of purpose relate to sleep? And so in that broad context, I would say that this column of water, when it's resonating with your internal frequencies of communication, when it's resonating at its clear antennas, the bunny ears are appropriately positioned on the television, your signal of self is very clear. If you start to get static, which is the inflammation, the external stressors, the internal stressors, the negative self-talk, the negative fear of sleep, just as we can develop fear of food because we become obese, any of these things, that we can create stress within ourselves as well. And so sleep and self-identity and the spiritual context of all of this, I think, really comes down to how clear can you get the signal? How clearly can we hear you? And to do that, you need to really free yourselves up of expectations of who you are, what your roles are, what your responsibilities are, and the like. And so we can come back to that in a few minutes. But Pete, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I want you to grab a couple questions that are ringing at you and see if we can keep the information flowing.
having some headphone issues there. We talked so long it killed my battery. um, I've been trying to answer some questions in the Q and A. There's some great ones. One that this has come up a couple of times that I wanted to hit, and I think I touched on it at the end, was how not to beat yourself up and obsessing about sleep and getting sleep. And I know from nights where I had a big day the next day and I couldn't get to sleep, and knowing I couldn't get to sleep stressed me out even more, and I couldn't sleep. And then thinking about how I can change my sleep, and not stressing and beating yourself up. Um, I think that's a really important thing to think about, because you don't want to get stressed about something that's not supposed to be stressful. And like I said, with my day yesterday, I had a really lousy night's sleep last night, but I think back to why I did that. And I had a really wonderful, wonderful day. And, I cheated, had a couple Oreos before bed and stayed up too late. And I'm not going to beat myself up about that, because I really enjoyed the day. And participating in your life is just as important as anything else, the quality of sleep, for example. But on days where I realized that I didn't get to bed where I wanted to, um, I something came up and I had to deal with it before bed, or something happened, like this transition my family is just finishing up now of moving. Understanding that these life events happen is important, and being able to accept those things and understand that when I look at my next day's sleep results, and I see that, hey, I didn't sleep great. I know why, and I'm going to try to do better with it. I'm not going to obsess about it. I know that I had Oreos last night. I'm going to let it slide. Um, you can get too obsessed about these things, and get too obsessed about how much time I go to bed, getting to bed at the exact same time, doing all the things I need to do, that you forget to live life. And you can't let that interfere with life. Like I always say, it's a short period of time we have here with each other, and we need to make the best of it. And those interactions we have with other people and our friendships and family are more important than me getting a couple of extra hours of good sleep. The other question that came up a couple of times was about different CBDs and cannabis, Zach. And I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on that. I think that um, you know not so much cannabis, but more in the CBD world. I think that can be very helpful for people um, to use for sleep. Um, and I know there's a lot of science around that right now, and with it being an emerging industry, it's not a lot in terms of regulations or government oversight. So you have to be careful on what you're getting, what you're buying. Not all CBD is equal. The stuff you're going to buy at your local drugstore or supermarket isn't the same that you're going to be able to get at a medicinal facility. So you have to be careful of what you're getting. And CBD is very complicated in terms of what you're getting in the CBD, and that comes from the more high-end medicinal types of CBD, opposed to the different things you can just buy off the shelf somewhere in a grocery store. I'm kind of curious what you think about that, Zach.
Yeah, great questions coming through on a bunch of sleep medications being asked about here. But on cannabis as a whole, as an endocrinologist, I have a lot of concerns about long-term cannabis use, and the fact that it really messes with our satiety center. And so leptin is a critical hormone that's produced by the fat cell to tell us when we've eaten enough food. And the ghrelin is produced by the stomach lining, telling us when we're hungry. And that hunger and satiety center seems to get really screwed up with long-term cannabis usage. And CBD, perhaps being a little less disruptive to that side, interplays really significantly with our pain centers and stuff like that. And so whenever there's an exogenous stimulus to the body, we start to change the expression of receptors in particular on the surface of our cells. And so this allows us to develop kind of a dependence on any stimulus. And that stimulus can be something, normal and biologic. It can, we can get addicted to exercise. We can get addicted to sex. We can get addicted to, the sleep itself. And so there's patterns in which we can so consistently build a artificial environment around our body that it adapts to it and comes to expect it. And so whether you're talking about CBD or a benzodiazepine, which are, about the far apart as I can think of as, natural and severely unnatural approaches to sleep, there's going to be a whole range of potential benefits and toxicities to those. And so, if you're on a benzodiazepine, which, you may need to look up your medications and figure out which class of meds you're taking there. But in general, if you're on a pharmaceutical drug for sleep, there's a very high likelihood that you've developed severely disordered sleep in the context. You may be now sleeping 6 hours a night routinely instead of waking up every hour. So you think, oh, thank goodness, I must be getting, I'm doing better with sleep. But in fact, many of those drugs will steal REM from you. And so your short-term memory loss accelerates, and your stress coping mechanisms and your emotional patterns of processing are disrupted. REM sleep is famous for memory, but an undervaluated reason for REM is actually emotional processing. The hippocampus is in the lateral portion of the temporal lobe, and the hippocampal formation is about the size of my thumb. And I'll give you my let's see, how can I show you this? So the hippocampal formation, about the last digit of my thumb there. And the nail itself is about the size of the memory center. So where we transition short-term to long-term memory, wrapped around that thin rim of tissue around my thumbnail is about the size of the amygdala, which is where we process intense emotion and create intense emotion. So everything from rage to frustration, hopelessness, all these intense emotions are created and processed in that amygdala. The hippocampal formation is influenced dramatically by REM sleep. And so without REM, we lose the memory part, but we also lose this kind of modeling and processing of emotional experience. And so we tend to, in sleep deprived states, start to become emotionally labile, right? It's not just major depression. We just simply have a shorter fuse. We get frustrated quicker at our loved ones. We're more likely to snap, and be bitchy to somebody who, typically we'd have a great reserve for. We just get short. And so that's that sleep impact on the hippocampus. And so your drugs tend to interrupt that relationship between the peripheral neurologic system and the central nervous system components that help you process the day and the experience. So my preference is always to find the lowest impact. And in general, I'm looking for whole food sources of nutrients for the brain to improve its quality. And so before I go to a purified, drug-like attempt at the medical world, which might include things like not just CBD, but other purified things that we use. One example is metformin has been used by a few people thinking that maybe that would improve sleep. Metformin is a extract from a root, of a plant, and so it seems very. But as soon as we take that root and turn it into metformin, we develop side effects and biologic consequences of that purification. So anytime we take one piece out of a plant, say CBD, there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance there for me, that there's a warning somewhere in there of like, we've done something to that plant to lose the intelligence of the whole plant. And if we use the whole plant, we know there's biologic consequences that are untoward towards things like your sleep patterns and your satiety center, your appetite regulation, all of that. So for me, while CBD may be a really useful thing on the market right now to move us towards a greater goal, I think it's only moving us towards a greater goal. And so it's a Band-Aid that may be functional right now, but I would look towards something like maybe the herbals that are whole plant sourced before you go to something like CBD. And so the whole plant things include things like lavender and the like. There's one supplement on the market that I used for many years in my primary care practice around sleep disorder, which is, the brand is called Deep Sleep. How they trademarked that, I have no idea. But Deep Sleep is a 5 herbal mix. And so it's 5 herbs in their whole context, not extracted, put into a capsule there. And so you might take a look at that and just look at the ingredients within Deep Sleep and see if there's a couple of elements in there that you might want in a more single plant form, or take the 5 herbal mix. I don't own any stake in that company. I don't have any tie to it, but so there's no reason you should go after Deep Sleep in and of itself. It's just frankly an easy one to grab off the shelf, knowing you're getting 5 whole herbs to see the impact of those nutrients on your neurologic system. So whole plants rather than extracted plants is an interesting path to go, with always the understanding that the reason we have these receptors in our body is because we also produce these compounds. So the reason we have CBD receptors on so many of our neurons is because we make endocannabinoids. It's one of the main mechanisms by which we communicate from organ system to organ system. And so when we take an exogenous source to stimulate those same receptors, we're likely disrupting some of these greater patterns within us. So short term, it might be a great tool to break yourself out of the habit or the fear of sleep or the lack of thereof. And so if you need something like a deep sleep or a CBD oil or whatever it is, finding a couple of those tools to break the psychological patterns of sleep anxiety and sleep fear may be really useful. As long as you're looking at all of these as traveling towards a lifestyle that embraces an organic experience of holistic sleep, I think you're going in the right direction. So that's kind of where I'm at with those. Pete, what else comes up for you on the list of questions that we might be missing there?
That was great. I like that. Those are good comments about getting you over that hump of the stress of sleep and the whole plan. That was great. I think we just got a message from Jesse on here that we're over our time. We got to wrap it up.
Wow, that went quick. All right, very good. Thanks, Jesse, for keeping us on track. What a pleasure to be with all of you. Pete, first of all, thank you to you. Great effort in putting the talk together. And everybody tune in to our newsletter. Pete wrote a great content piece for us that can be seen there, zachbushmd.com there in the knowledge base. I think is how you get to that. Jesse, please straighten us out if you need more detail on how they can find Pete's efforts there. Furthermore, we're looking forward to upcoming content. We'll be starting to use the brain as a perspective and through which we can look at all of the future content that we're going to be looking at here. And so in the coming months, as we dive into things like probiotics or gut health or immune system, every one of those has a brain perspective on it. And so I'm excited to keep Pete engaged for the long term with all of you through your continued support. And also inviting you guys to jump on our website to take a look at the Intrinsic Health series. If you feel like you're really craving an experience to go through, you can do it as a group in a group coaching environment, or you can do it individually through Biology Basecamp Community Connect in a group, or the Biology Basecamp individual experience. And sometimes having that coach on your journey as you start to look at, what are the stressors that are leading to this poor sleep pattern in my life? What are the life patterns that I need to break? Especially if you're in that pattern where I've done absolutely everything. I've learned everything I can. I've studied everything and my sleep is still terrible. Important time to have a coach. And so whether you do it through our program or some other coach out there, find a coach to start to listen to you, because what I have found as a physician is over and over again, what my dean of medicine told me on my very first day of medical school is, if you listen long enough, the patient always tells you not only what their condition is, but what the solution to their condition is. And the problem that we have as physicians is we're not taught to listen, and we're not taught to trust the intuitive nature and the intuition capacity of the individual that's on the other side of the exam room. So, and be empowered to know that you not only know what your problem is, you know the solution to your problem. And you may have to listen deeply. And this is where the mindfulness piece that Dr. Cummings really finished with comes in, is you may need to ground in so deep that you listen to this water column for the first time. You need to listen to why you are here. What are you here to do? And maybe sleep is not part of this journey for you. Maybe this is not a necessary even part of your journey, because your journey has something to do with understanding the extremity of stress in others and having empathy in that space. And so I don't know what your journey is. I don't know what your purpose is here, but you do. And sleep may be an important part of that journey for you. Not having the sleep may take you to exactly the solutions and fundamental discoveries that you're going to make that are going to show you something much larger about yourself and life that you would have never discovered without the insomnia. And so if you have chronic sleep disorder, look at it as part of your path. Part of your ordained reason for being here was to be on whatever physiologic journey you're on. You are on your right mission. You are taking every next step correctly. The fact that you're on today suggests that you are curious, that you have an intrinsic desire for more knowledge, to have more experience to tap into by being in community together rather than isolated in your human experience. And so all of you are showing us by being here with us today and listening in later on the recorded versions that you are part of this community that's connected, interconnected. And when we connect deeply and we connect in purpose, shared purpose, we actually create a hyperintelligence where we can know more than any single individual can know, where we experience more than any single individual can experience. And so in the end, I believe that we are, as a humanity, a connected neurologic system. And in our isolation from one another that has been further exasperated by the pandemic and the social distancing and all of this, it's really critical that we come together more and more often in more and more deliberate fashions to share information, to experience each other's journeys. So thank you for connecting to one another through the chat again. And thank you for your ongoing effort to connect to those around you with hope. There's so much recommendations for hope and encouragement within the chat. And so I so appreciate that contribution there. So Jesse, thank you for all your coordination behind the scenes. Thank you, Bjorn, and your efforts to get the communication flowing out through our website and everything else. Thank you all for your support through the Global Health Education Initiative that we're going. Feel free to jump on our page that will be focusing on the global health education funding there. That's through the GoFundMe site. And then also the Intrinsic Health series, if you're looking for more support on understanding the fundamentals of health through biology, we break it down into 8 general categories of health and how they all influence one another. And so we go from things like nutrition to exercise to breathing to fasting to sleep and the rest, to realize that none of us taught the essentials of being healthy. It's so ironic that we've created this complex, intelligent human species and society without any education fundamental to these building blocks that make us healthy. So that's where we go with the Intrinsic Health series, dive deeper into what are the foundations of biologic health and how can we relearn these patterns of behavior to embrace a much different endpoint, and ultimately so that you have more energy and more clarity as to why you're here, what your purpose is, and why you've blessed us with your beauty. So thank you for being a part of this. We look forward to future events with you, and I'm eager to continue to see the intelligence of this whole community have a positive impact on the world. Thank you so much for joining.